Hey everyone, Lukium here. This clip is a segment for a larger video where I dive into social media grifting, specifically looking at how it plays out in an online debate titled, "Is Democracy on the Ballot in 2024?" If you want to see the full breakdown with all the context and additional counter-arguments, check out the main video. You can find it in the card above or in the description. There, you see all the different ways that misinformation was spread throughout the debate. Now, if you agree with my take, please drop a like. Unfortunately, it seems like these kinds of videos are getting dislike bombed by those who support misinformation, so your like really helps the message reach more people. And if you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments and I'll see you there. Next, AJW shifts focus to Letitia James, trying to claim that actually it was she who ran on investigating Trump without any cause. That is, that she ran for office on a promise of a fishing expedition against Trump. To prove this, he shows a series of clips.
I will be shining a bright light into every dark corner of his real estate dealings and every dealing, demanding truthfulness at every turn.
So right there, and it's dated November 7th of 2018, prior to Letitia James taking office as the Attorney General, she is pledging to a crowd that she will shine a bright light, not just into Trump's real estate dealings, which you might be able to argue in some way, shape, or form. There was a case in the news that she might be referring to, but all of his dealings, and she says she's going to demand truthfulness at every turn. This is a fishing expedition. When you are telling people you're going to look into somebody in order to find evidence of a crime.
Even I do have the clips of Letitia where she said to a voter on the street that you should vote for her because she's going to sue Trump.
Now, by the way, this isn't the only time Letitia James did this. When she was approached by somebody asking her about the value of voting, she ended up responding to this person in this way.
And what would you say to people who say, oh, I'm not going to bother to register to vote because my voice doesn't make a difference, or I'm just one person?
I say one name, Donald Trump. That should motivate you. Get off your ass and vote.
Will you sue him for us?
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the ass. He's going to know my name personally.
I love it. He probably does already.
Again, there's Letitia James saying vote for her because Donald Trump. And when asked if she will sue Donald Trump, she's not saying we'll use all the afforded legal avenues in order to challenge anything that he's doing that's breaking the law. She says, yes, I'm going to sue him. Campaign promise directly to this individual right here.
It's really critically important that everyone understand, as was mentioned by Mr. Verhara, that filing a lawsuit, simply opening up an investigation, can ruin lives. And so with respect to Donald Trump, we need to follow his money. We need to find out where he's laundered money. We need to find out whether or not he's engaged in conspiracy and whether or not he's colluded not only with Putin, but also with China as well.
Now again, you have Letitia James during the actual debates of the election in September of 2018 saying that she's going to follow Trump's money in order to see if he's money laundering and whatnot. And this is a fishing expedition because, once again, she doesn't have evidence for a crime. She's promising that she's going to just look into all his transactions in order to find money laundering, but there's nothing right now that says that she's continuing an investigation.
Now, these clips might represent the highest level of dishonesty from AJW so far, but don't worry, he will top it soon enough. Anyway, let's break down the three videos and then move on to the context that was intentionally left out. First, AJW presents a video from November 7th of 2018 after the campaign was over in the context of James running for office on a fishing expedition. You can tell he's aware of his dishonesty because he chooses his words very carefully, not introducing the video as being a campaign video, a small subtlety that enables him to dishonestly use the video but without outright lying. He also leaves out the historical context as it relates to what was said in the video. We'll cover the context when we're done going over the videos. Next, AJW shows a short interaction between Letitia James and an individual where James, in jest, says she'll sue Trump. He frames this as a campaign promise, but again, the video is from after the election, and it wasn't released by James herself or intended as part of her campaign. So how can it be a campaign promise when voters didn't see it until after they'd already voted? At worst, you can say that this interaction was in poor taste, though again, given the context at the time, it would be easily justifiable. Finally, AJW shows a debate clip from September 2018, where as part of a debate, James discusses investigating Trump for potential money laundering and a few other things. AJW dishonestly leaves out the question asked of James, as well as a relevant portion of the answer. Here is the question and answer.
Thank you, Brian. As Attorney General, if you are elected, you will have enormous power, and people have a right to know how you will use that power. Just opening an investigation can destroy your reputation, ruin a livelihood, influence an election. Literally, just opening the case. So I want to ask each of you what is your view of the proper basis required to start an investigation of a person or a corporation or a nonprofit? How much smoke, if any, does there need to be? And how do you guard against a rush to judgment against someone, whether it's an average unknown New Yorker or Donald Trump and his associates? Ms. James.
We should all follow the example of Barbara Underwood. Following the facts and following the evidence. And I'm so glad that my opponents now agree with me that when you file a lawsuit, one should be judicious. Whether it's the Martin Act, the Donnelly Act, deceptive business practices, consumer law, it's really critically important that everyone understand, as was mentioned by Mr. Verhara, that filing a lawsuit, simply opening up an investigation, can ruin lives. And so with respect to Donald Trump, we need to follow his money. We need to find out where he's laundered money. We need to find out whether or not he's engaged in conspiracy and whether or not he's colluded not only with Putin, but also with China as well. We all know that 10 years ago he was almost bankrupt. Most domestic banks were not lending him any money. Where did he get all of the money to purchase his real estate holdings and all of his golf courses? And all of those transactions have happened here in New York City, which is why the next Attorney General is absolutely critical.
As you can clearly see, Letitia James doesn't just bring up Trump gratuitously. She's directly asked about him. Also, before talking about him, she explicitly talks about the importance of being careful about opening an investigation against someone because of the damage that it can do to them. So how come she says all the things she does about Trump? We'll go over that shortly, but before we do, let's quickly go over the follow-up question, which AJW also dishonestly leaves out, which anyone
unambiguously defending my own honor
would have included.
Thank you, Ms. James. Can I just ask one very quick follow-up, just a few seconds from each of you? A lot of you mentioned Donald Trump. You've been mentioning Donald Trump in your campaigns. And part of the spirit of the question was to find out from you, notwithstanding there being some smoke with respect to some aspects of what this president has done in his private business, there are cases that have been brought, cases that's pending on the part of the Attorney General's office itself. But is anyone on this panel saying that because there's some evidence in some area, or some smoke in some area, that means that without more, that every single business, associate, organization that is in any way affiliated with Donald Trump is ripe for investigation without more?
There's at least 100 inquiries into his transactions, but the ones that obviously individuals are focused on is the Mueller investigation, the Southern District, the Attorney General, and also the FBI. Those are the investigations which obviously are closing the walls in on Donald Trump. So it's really critically important that we not just talk about association, that we talk about his transactions, and more importantly, that we talk about the Trump Foundation and the organization as a whole.
As you can see, when asked for clarification, Letitia James clearly specifies that she's talking about the context of existing investigations, whether it be the Mueller report, ongoing investigations in the Southern District of New York, and the Trump Foundation case. Therefore, bringing up this video as some sort of evidence for running on a fishing expedition is utterly and unequivocally dishonest, because it's done by intentionally leaving out parts of the video that show the video is proof of the exact opposite of what is being claimed. And that's not including the leaving out of the historical context. So let's go over all of the different things that were going on at the time as it relates to Trump and his legal issues in New York and Letitia James's statements. Let's start with the cases that had been recently closed that were no longer ongoing, but that had an impact on public interest on Trump's potential actions. In August of 2018, Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former personal attorney, pled guilty to multiple charges in conjunction with a Southern District of New York investigation. Included in the charges were allegations related to Donald Trump's hush money payments during the 2016 campaign to Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels to hide his extramarital affairs with them. These are the same facts that eventually led to the investigations, indictment, and criminal conviction against Donald Trump by the Manhattan DA's office, ultimately making Donald Trump a convicted felon. Next, as part of the Mueller investigation, Paul Manafort, Donald Trump's former campaign manager, pled guilty to several offenses in September of 2018. Including these offenses was laundering money indirectly tied to Russian interests, which is relevant to the public opinion around the time that Letitia James was running for office. Next, we have cases and investigations that were ongoing at the time that had an impact on public interest on Donald Trump's actions and potential legal liabilities. By the time of Letitia James' election, the case against Trump's charitable foundation was already fairly developed in the court system, with plenty of evidence in the public domain that Trump had essentially stolen from his charity in order to further his 2016 presidential campaign. Also, while Paul Manafort had already pled guilty to several offenses, the investigation was still in full steam and would go on to secure several convictions against people in Donald Trump's orbit, including Michael Flynn, Trump's former national security advisor, Rick Gates, Trump's deputy campaign manager, George Papadopoulos, a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign, and others. These convictions were all in relation to communications with Russians seeking to interfere with the 2016 election or obstruction of the investigation of said interference. Therefore, there was great interest at the time of Letitia James' election on whether Trump himself may have participated in any illegal activity within the scope of Mueller's Russian interference investigation within New York jurisdiction, since at the time of the campaign he lived and ran his campaign from New York. Finally, let's talk about some of the other ongoing investigations and facts that might directly or indirectly impact public interest in Donald Trump's potential illegal activities in New York. Donald Trump had been borrowing hundreds of millions of dollars from Deutsche Bank throughout the preceding decade, at a time when virtually no other banks would do business with him due to his multiple business failures. By itself, this was already strange, but what made it more worrisome is that the same bank became embroiled in multiple investigations surrounding illegal financial activity, including laundering Russian money. Finally, adding in Trump's soft touch on Russia at the time, from his reluctance to criticize Putin, his delays to implement sanctions on Russia passed by Congress, and his memorable choice to stand with Putin against all U.S. intelligence agencies in Helsinki in July of 2018. The result was a strong perception that Trump may in fact have been working with the Russians, especially as more and more people in his orbit kept being convicted or pleading guilty throughout the Mueller investigation. Next, in addition to all the explicitly illegal behavior surrounding Donald Trump, there was also the way he had deviated from the norms as president, where virtually every president before him had taken substantial steps to either completely divest from financial interests that could lead to a conflict of interest in the Oval Office. Trump acted almost diametrically opposite, retaining direct interest in the Trump organization by only moving into a trust controlled by his children. One strong example of how this proved a potential issue relates to the Chinese government. The Trump organization had as a tenant one of the largest banks in the world, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, which is majority owned by the Chinese government. Then, there are all the Chinese trademarks that Trump was awarded. Yet another example of potential conflicts of interest resulting from Trump's refusal to properly divest from his business interest while in the White House. It makes it even more suspicious when the trademarks, which had been held up in China for over a decade, just went through as Trump announced his One China policy, which heavily benefited the Chinese government. While there were no ties suggesting a quid pro quo with China, the facts alone, together with all of Trump's illegalities, would reasonably justify an inquiry. Given this overall picture, it would absolutely make sense for Letitia James to, during her campaign and after, speak about the need to investigate or inquire into not only Donald Trump's real estate dealings, but all dealings, demanding truthfulness at every turn to check whether he was involved in money laundering, conspiracy, or collusion with Putin or China. To omit this context while simultaneously using heavily edited videos to claim that Letitia James ran on conducting a fishing expedition against Donald Trump is extremely dishonest. So much for
unambiguously defending my own honor.